Volume 7 C3. We're in a real bind here, Raymond stated point blank to the Black Scriptures extra seat. She sat across from Raymond, the butt of her scythe on the floor. She idly spun it like a child's toy top, whirling the massive blade faster than even his eyes could follow. "So what?" she asked. "I'm supposed to be your secret weapon, you know, humanity's trump card and all that. Are you really prepared to expose me to the public?" "No. We want you to go in disguise, an anonymous competitor, and win the throne." Raymond leaned forward and slid his hands along the surface of his desk. "I wouldn't ask you for this, but with the Kingdom of Nazarik's pro-demi-human stance spreading, we need to counterbalance them. Otherwise?" He let the statement hang. "I have no interest in ruling a kingdom, let alone an empire," she said point blank, her face turned sour. "Not a chance." "Would you do it as a favor to me?" he asked. "Please," he added when she said nothing. She's shoulders slumped, and Raymond felt a wave of relief wash over him. The others could not have gotten this far, he was sure of that. Old as she was, she was barely a teenager in terms of elf years. She was driven more by her desires than anything else, though close on the heel of her emotional wants was her sense of camaraderie with the very few she knew closely. Her friends, which included him, and it was why she listened to him now. "Fine, but on one condition," she answered, and Raymond straightened up and fell quiet, focusing all his attention on her. "You make sure my father attends. I don't care what lies you have to tell or what you have to do, but you do everything in your power to give me this chance," she demanded, and Raymond immediately answered. "I'll use every spy at our disposal, and pull every favor I can with the others, but we'll make sure he has every reason and chance to go. If he does though, the rest is up to you." Raymond warned and held out his right hand. She took his hand in hers and squeezed it just enough to remind him of her strength. "That will not be a problem, Raymond," she said and got up to her feet. "He'll pay dearly for making me," she added, and left the cardinal alone. Ainz sat on the throne of Nazarik with his guardians arrayed on one knee before him. Behind them knelt Sabos and the Pleiades. Behind them knelt the homegrown team of power-level humans once known as Foresight. Behind them knelt the defeated and resurrected team once known as the Imperial Knights. The only guardian not below was Albedo, who stood at his right hand with her fingers interlaced together at her waist and her bright yellow eyes looking over the arrayed weapons of the Allfather. "Before we begin," Ainz proclaimed, "I would like to hear your reports. Shaltir, we begin with you." "Yes, my lord," she said and rose to her feet. "The frogman population is growing again, and we have 2 settlements established, with room and numbers for 2 more. Hiketi has requested that when the next generation comes of age that some of her younger generation be formally allowed to join the Allfather's army. She says her soldiers will make the finest amphibious soldiers we could ask for." Ainz chuckled. "I'm sure she's right. Plan for it in the long run." "Demiurge?" Ainz asked as Shaltir knelt, and Demiurge rose to his feet. "My lord, the dwarves and Quagoa continue to," he cleared his throat, "found more evidence of their shared past, and it is deepening ties between the two. I have started using mind control magic to ensure disputes are settled fairly, and under my legal system, the race of everyone involved in a civil or criminal suit is kept secret from the ones deciding punishment. Every jury is made up of equal numbers of both races. This has kept arguments and grudge-driven violence down. The Quagoa are now integrated into dwarven society, and the dwarven numbers are growing. Many children are being born to runesmith families as a result of your incentives. They have only one complaint." "Oh?" Ainz raised an eyebrow. It was still strange to bare his human face to all his subjects, and though it was a relief, a wave of shame washed over him once again. "I should never have questioned the love of my precious children. Never." The hurt he did to Albedo was no doubt the largest, but it troubled him more than a little to think that he might have done the same to the others. Demiurge seemed not to notice the thoughts hidden behind Ainz's eyes and went on, "Yes, my lord. The runesmiths are so successful, that there simply aren't enough dwarf women for the rest. They're complaining about the lack of available mates." "Oh." Ainz felt a little blush rise to his cheeks and brought a hand up to rub his cheeks with thumb and forefinger to hide his embarrassment. "We won't curb the favor toward the runesmiths, but will limit them to 1 wife. However, reward each dwarf woman who marries, with a long-term stipend that increases with each child." Their population was so decimated by the war with the Quagga that this will be necessary for at least a few generations. I suppose it isn't good for there to be only a small number reproducing anyway, even if they do have useful talents.
Is that all?
Yes, my lord. Otherwise all is well, Demiurge said, and knelt down again. Sabos? Ines inquired. The butler of steel rose to his feet and with a little half-bow he said, My lord, the Beastman Kingdom has lost control over 7/10 of what they took from the Draconic Kingdom. They now have only 2 cities, and our teams have rescued almost all of their human stock. Hunger runs through their ranks and we have taken many Beastmen prisoners. Have they explained their invasion? Ines asked, and Sabos bowed his head again. Yes, my lord. Famine. They produced too many of their own numbers and didn't have enough meat to feed everyone. Starvation ran wild and their invasion was meant to stave it off. Sabos explained, now with victory near, the Draconic Queen has sent word that she offers her hand in marriage to secure my lord's claim to her kingdom. Ines didn't have to look up to his right to know that Albedo tensed just a little, but what she said was a surprise. If it pleases my lord, I will visit the Draconic Queen to make arrangements. In a few generations, per our lord's plan, you will have a scion of your line on every throne. Powerful and loyal, your empire will be a family business that our children will govern for you. Just as you desire. Just when did that become the plan? He wondered, but more concerning was her statement about arrangements. I've grown very fond of Draudilin. I learned so much about kingship from watching her in Crisis. So he asked, what arrangements do you intend? Only to explain her place in the Allfather's world. I assume the arrangement with Draudilin should match that of Calca, putting your heir on the throne as a guarantee while you rule from here? Albedo asked, and Ines lowered his head as he wondered. How did this happen? Albedo, however, took his lowered head to be a nod of acknowledgement. I will visit her soon then, as our lord wills. Sabos, do you have more? Nothing of consequence, my lady, he said, and knelt again. Albedo, how are things in the Holy Kingdom? Ines asked, filing away her earlier words for later thought. And perhaps a little panic. My lord, your son is healthy and the Queen continues her slow recovery. It hasn't stopped her from governing, in part thanks to Kellet and Gustav's assistance. Our doppelganger agents keep her court free of corruption, and most of what was destroyed has now been rebuilt. Trade is growing between them and Deme Albion, and a surprisingly friendly correspondence takes place between the Holy Queen and the Queen of Frost. Oh yes. Deme Albion. Ines nodded and thought back to the curious young dragonid that united the region. Albedo took that to be a question, and chose to answer it. The Queen of Frost has built roads that stretch all the way to the border with the Dark Elves, the Dark Dwarven Mountains, and the Riastais Kingdom. Trade and travel are slowly beginning to flourish as a result. Our agents, however, have noted one oddity. An oddity? Ines asked. Yes, a member of the Black Scripture of the Slain Theocracy has been spotted coming and going over the border. Albedo frowned. He doesn't seem to be doing anything. He just hunts, eats, and naps. He takes lots of those, then goes home again. From what we have been able to determine from investigating some of his favorite spots, he's been at it for years. That is extremely strange, Ines said and drummed the fingers of his right hand on the armrest of the Throne of Kings. Keep an eye on it, but do nothing. As you will it, my lord. Now about the Kingdom of Carni. The Wolf Queen and Wolf King have announced the royal pregnancy and the coming birth of their first child. The heir will be born in the spring of next year. The alchemical genius leaves governing to his queen and has announced several breakthroughs in his research into new healing potions and even the possibility of a new mana potion. Ines gasped, a mana potion. I've encountered none of those since coming here. If we monopolize something like that and keep it secret, our magic casters will have a potency we could only dream of. Depending on how effective it is. His mind raced and he answered immediately, support that effort above all else. The only rival priority will be morphomancy advancement for my own situation. As my lord wills it, Albedo said, now I believe Pandora's actor has news about the Crimson Queen of Riastais? Yes, mine Vater. Pandora's actor popped up to his feet and stretched his hand out in a grandiose gesture, one hand on his breast, the other raised toward the Throne of Kings. Mine kleine Vampire is in love with Momen, such is her passion that she shocks even myself, and I know not what to do. She wishes to travel with me to our winter. I beg Mindvator's wisdom, as through her I am bound to the great adventurers of all these human nations. Pandora's actor. That is hardly news of Rhea's ties. Albedo gave him only mild reproach as she caught the tiny shake in his dramatically extended fingers, but Ines put a hand out to cover Albedo's and shook his head. No, I am his father, Ines said with finality. I was that, before I was the Allfather. The faceless doppelganger's hand on his heart closed into a tight fist at Ines' words, and quietly held silent while the Lord of Nazarick considered what to say. A bond between you two would be good for my kingdom. It would bind everybody who reveres her, and Momen, to the kingdom they're part of, which will mean a bond to the kingdom of Nazarick. However, I am a father before a king, and I don't want to bind my children to anyone that won't make them happy. Do as you think best. If you like her, savor her. If you do not, then refuse her and remain professional. Only you can decide what is best, but remember, a kingdom is a family business, and whatever comes of your union, I may have to use you both for the good of the whole. Mindvator's wisdom is beyond price. I thank you. I will consider your words. Is there anything more? Ines asked. Yes, Mindvator. The Crimson Queen and her consort have conceived a child as well, also due in the coming spring. Knowing as I now do that there is a crop of royals rising up, might I suggest, Mindvator, that we establish a common school for such children, that they grow up together for part of every year of their youth? Thus they will be bonded tightly to you and to any offspring you produce, and to one another in turn? Pandora's actor made the suggestion as if it were nothing, but Ines and Albedo traded a glance at one another. The utility of such a project was too great to ignore as the power of Nazarick continued to spill outward over the surrounding nations, and if it took a few years to prepare, what of it? Yuri Alpha, Ines said, and the maid rose to her feet. You will select the ground and undertake the project. Mayor will assist you with everything that you need. I want it built and ready to host the Children of Power within 5 years, including a full staff of trained maids and teachers in every conceivable subject. I would be pleased and privileged to bear this duty, Lord Ines. Thank you, she said, and curtsied with dainty perfection. Now, my situation, Ines finally said and turned his eye back to Demiurge. My lord, Demiurge said and kept his head bowed where he knelt, we have had limited success with our test subject. Remedios Custodio routinely ends her own life when we transform her, which is not a problem. We simply restrain her when we want to see how long it lasts. However, the only success we have in extended transformation is if it is done after death. A true race change for you. I fear we will need a world item in order to affect the outcome in the way we need. Then search for some, Ines commanded. Search the libraries of human nations and beyond to search for a morphomantic world item in their legends and lore, and we will go from there. As my lord commands. Demiurge answered and fell silent. Now, all that remains is the matter of Baharuth. Albedo pointed out, and all eyes, already focused on Ines, became far more intent. Who will be our champion, my lord? Albedo asked as the silence stretched out. Volume 7 C4. There was no one clear choice for the Allfather of Nazarick. He sat on his throne, free of his mask, free of his burdens and fears of rejection, though he doubted he would ever be completely free of his guilt. Albedo was happy. He himself was happy. And another child on the way. That thought was never far from his mind, and it posed one worry that he was not readily free from. Being a good father, to my son, and to my daughter. Wait. Why am I so certain it will be a girl? Those emotions slammed into him like a train striking one of the unfortunates of his homeworld that flung themselves in front of the tracks. It was very rare that he missed his skeletal body. But the supreme swelling of worry blended with affection was enough to make him long for his limiter for the first time in a very great long while. The immediate problem was whom to dispatch. I suppose I could have had the Baharuth Empire practically for the asking. But the issue of loyalty without their oaths being a given. I can't be sure that wouldn't be a problem. Perhaps I made a mistake in the refusal before. Oh well, I can make up for it now by participating in the tournament they thought was my idea. The only issue was that there were a multitude of good options, while some were out due to their existing burdens. Shiltir had the frogmen and the lizardmen. Demiurge had the dwarves. Sabos and his teams both handled the draconic kingdom. Pandora's actor and Lupus Regina managed the issue of the kingdom. Kalka was loyal but I need to set someone to watching over them there. Perhaps Entama or Nobril? I can't help thinking I should send CZ as an ambassador to the Queen of Frost. I don't know why, but something tells me that they'll get along well. Ainz thought and then rubbed his chin as if deep in thought. Cocytus was an obvious choice. He was a warrior without peer, but he was also a heteromorph, and humans would have a difficult time accepting him. The trouble was, almost each one he considered shared that same drawback, and the more like a human the choice was, the easier everything would be. I do need to send someone to watch over Kalka and our son. Cocytus might enjoy that, and when they see his devotion to protecting and teaching the boy, that might help soften some of the anti-heteromorphic sentiment. His fixation on honorable combat would also help out with their warrior class. Yes, that's perfect, Ainz thought, and hot on the heels of his former idea. Another idea struck him for the tournament. Of course. How did I not think of her immediately? He wanted to smack himself in the face. Call Oreolomega to the throne room. Ainz gave the order, and within minutes, the lovely porcelain doll-like form of Oreolomega entered the throne room. She was dressed as a shrine maiden, red and white robes with long hanging sleeves, and short, straight black hair that hung just a little lower than her ears at the sides, and with a long ponytail that hung down her back. A girlish smile plastered firmly on her face, she skipped into the throne room with the fervor of a joyful young girl who was happy to see her father return from work. Her final skip brought her to a kneeling position at the base of the throne and her right hand came up to her small chest just over the heart. Allfather, you called, I came. Can I send someone to fight who is just that cute? He asked himself. She acted like a girl just barely into her teens, and sounded the part to boot. She is level 100. I see no reason why not. There's very little that should pose a threat to her in this world as far as I've seen. His resolve settled, he explained the nature of recent events, and held a hand out toward her. You are chosen to fight for the kingdom of Nazarick, win an empire in single combat. Defeat the world's champions, and establish our kingdom as supreme. Oreolomega raised her hand and gave him a playful smile which flashed her pearl-white teeth. Is that all, my lord? I'd be overjoyed to do this for you. Are these fights to the death or? It is my understanding that the arena of our winter presently prohibits battle to the death. However, it is possible that this will not be the case for these duels. Ainz pointed out, their instructions about it are curiously lacking. Perhaps they figure anyone should come to the arena willing to die if they want to win an empire for themselves? Okay. Oriole piped up, she made small fists just in front of her chest. I'll fight real hard and kick their butts. She grinned and punched the air. The gust of a breeze followed, and Ain's royal robes rustled a little at her action. I'm sure you will, Ainz said with a gentle little look, but remember I prioritize my children over any amount of land. If you do face defeat, you may surrender to save yourself and I won't scold you. Thanks my lord, but no worries. I won't lose. It won't even be a contest. She punched her fist up in celebration, the broad smile still filling up most of her little round, soft face. She was the opposite of a warrior in every way. When do I leave, my lord? She asked. She was already starting to bob and bounce a little where she knelt, filled with energy, vigor, and an eagerness to get started. Ainz had to laugh, thick and rich, his voice rang out over the whole of his mighty hall. Not for weeks, we'll just be taking a gate, so we have no need to hurry. Familiarize yourself with some of the customs of Baharuth so that you don't disgrace yourself, but otherwise consider this your free time to enjoy yourself before you're big. He sought just the right word. As happy as she was, it didn't seem like fight was quite right. Then it hit him, your big debut. Make it a good show, Oreolomega. Course, my lord. I'll do my best, she exclaimed, and nobody, of course, questioned that. Evil Eye sidled up next to Moman. The campfire was crackling away, and for the moment they were alone. Lupu, Gagran, Lakehughes and the twins were off testing their skills as hunters. But the vampire had only one prey in mind, and hunting that would not take her even an inch away from where she was right then. Moman took off his helmet and sat it between his feet. His hands were a dark brown tan, as was his face, and he looked deeply into the flames as if lost in thought. Do you like camping, Lord Moman? Evil Eye asked. Just Moman. We're traveling companions now after all. He flashed her a pleasant smile and then added, I do, actually. I used to spend a great deal of time alone. People in my position tend to do that, so a large outdoor world to explore, that pleases me. The evening warmth, a crackling fire, a fresh kill roasting. Simple pleasures like that are far removed from the petty concerns of a court. Adventure is far preferable to games of power and politics. I couldn't agree more, Evil Eye gasped. Every word of his sounded so damn noble. I'm not too close, am I? I'm comfortable here, if you are, he said, and glanced down at the masked adventurer. Why, yes of course I'm comfortable. Of course. I'm always comfortable next to you, Evil Eye said, and then realized just what she'd said. She sucked in a deep breath. She cringed back and waved her hands rapidly. That's not quite what I meant. I just meant you're marvelous company and I enjoy being with you. But not that way, just that we have so much in common and will shut up now. She groaned and put her hands beside her head. I'm glad I'm wearing this mask. By the 6 gods, I didn't think I could blush this much. How embarrassing. Evil Eye moaned. Moman eased himself down from the log he sat on so that he sat on the ground with his legs stretched out. It gave her something closer to an even look at his face. It's fine, mein Frau. All is well. I won't say a word to the others. You're the most enjoyable company too. Before she could say anything back, Gagran's voice reached them through the dark. Just because I used a hammer and you used your crosshair, does not make you a better hunter. No, giant virgin, but actually hitting with mine while you missing with yours, sure as hell does, Lupus Regina said in a sing-song sort of way. I didn't miss, I crushed its spine, Gagran said, coming into view as a giant shadow in the trees. Yes, but you were aiming for the head, and I actually hit what I was aiming for. Don't try to pass your shoddy work off as equal to my perfection, Lupu giggled while the giant woman fumed down at her. We got cock for dinner. Who wants a nice big cock? It's a little veiny and red in some places, plus the big oof kind of broke it in the middle, but if we give it a good rub it should be fine if we swallow it hot. Why is everybody looking at me that way? Lupu asked, looking around with a sweet smile at the blushes that were on every face as the others came back into view. Gagran groaned. Lupu. For the 1000th time it's called a cockatrice. You don't shorten it to cock. Please. Deep sighs of relief went up while they closed in on the campfire, dragging the monster behind them and crashing through the trees with every step. A few hours later, after a round of eating and drinking underneath the endless sky, when one by one they went to their bedrolls and Gagran was at last alone with Evil Eye, the giantess asked in a little whisper, So, did you do it? Evil Eye let out a frightened eep and whispered hoarsely back, Gagran. She then deflated, her shoulders slumped under the long stare of the big square-headed oaf of a sister. No. Nothing. I need more time. It's a long road to our winter, so you've got plenty of that. Gagran encouraged her and gave Evil Eye a slap on her shoulder. Good night, Shorty, and good luck tomorrow. The giant of a woman yawned and stretched her arms out and stood up. Yeah, you're right, thanks. I'll take the first watch. You get some rest, Evil Eye said, and watched her friend disappear into a slightly undersized tent that left her feet poking out as far as her shins, and a moment later snores began in earnest. Alone at last, Evil Eye looked into the flames and listened to the dark. Her eyes, she knew, were glowing bright in the darkness, but hidden by the mask she wore. It was impossible for any of them to know. I so want there to be more. But when he knows. The rejection loomed in her heart like a wolf lurking around their camp. Fear of how her sisters would react kept her quiet for years. How much more impossible and necessary would it be with a defender of humanity like Merman? I want more. But how can I have it? If he'd kill me for existing? Evil Eye asked herself the question, and even if she did feel weary before, she could not have slept after thinking about that, and the thought stayed with her clear till morning when her companions began to stir again. Volume 7 C5. Kalku approached the carriage with Aurelian in her arms. One pace back at her side walked Kellard Custodio. They were clad in dresses of blue and white with the bright symbol of the Roble Holy Kingdom on their chests. It wasn't lost on Gustav that the pair were dressed to match, but it was only because he was aware of the closeness of the pair that the meaning of their matching dresses was clear. The carriage, a large golden-rimmed and white-paneled conveyance, was drawn by 4 white horses whose flanks were painted with the insignia of the royal house in a bright sky blue. Atop the carriage, pennants of the same waved in the breeze. He held the door for the trio and allowed them to pass. Paladins. form. Up, he shouted each word alone, and from their places a dozen mounted men in full runecraft armor began to canter into place, 3 at the front, 3 at the back, and 3 to each side. Gustav then got in behind them. His own armor didn't clink. Runecraft armor, for whatever reason, seemed to be quiet, at least his own was. Unlike most, he preferred scale mail over plate, trading a little defense for a lot more maneuverability and greater endurance. Over his armor he wore a tabard to match their own. In the time since the Civil War and the invasion by the Frost Queen of Demalbion, the Holy Kingdom engaged in a period referred to as the Grand Renewal. The principal movement's relentless and incorruptible crusade against crime and injustice, backed by the crown, made the once nearly toppled royal family more popular than it had been in generations. So when the carriage rolled out over empty streets, it was to the sound of stupendous cheers. With Kalka's older brother acting as the regent for her in her absence, there wasn't one mind in 10,000 who doubted the secure future of the Holy Kingdom. Not least of all thanks to the trade ties with the Kingdom of Nazarick and the growing, ironically friendly relationship with the demi-humans to the east. It still struck Gustav as if it were all some strange dream. "Are we really going with her?" he asked, glancing out the window as the city rolled past the thronging. Kalka's arm was out the window while she waved to the people. Her smiling face in all her radiant beauty was at its best. It was Kellett who answered for the distracted queen while she attended to the affection of her admirers. "It's the practical thing to do, Gustav, you know that," Kellett said and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She snorted. "I know you're still not fond of their types, but..." He cut her off with a snort of his own. "No. That's not it. Don't forget, I had a hand in making that one what she is. Being around her is a reminder of the worst mistakes of my life. Maybe she's let go of her resentment toward me, I don't know, but even if she has, I haven't stopped resenting myself." The shame on his beardless face was obvious. He could not look at the woman to whom he spoke and his hands formed meaty fists that were tense and tight. "It'll be a long time before I let myself grow a man's beard again. It's a small penance, keeping it cut, but it's not nothing at least." When the carriage rolled out of the city at last and the gate began to close behind them all, Kalka turned her gentle face toward Gustav, then reached over and patted him on the knee. "You worry too much. A lot of harm was done by everyone, and we've all tried to get past it for the greater good. Things are going fine, all we have to do is keep them going that way, and traveling together with my..." Kalka coughed a little into her hand. "Royal sister. May seem strange, but it will go a long way toward showing both our peoples that we're united in our desire for peaceful coexistence. I suppose, but this will still all be lots easier to deal with when it's not just us. At least we don't have someone personally fighting in this tournament. Do we?" Gustav asked at last, and Kalka gave him a long, steady look. "Thank you for volunteering, Gustav." She gave him a sweet little smile as he flopped against the back of his blue fabric-covered seat. "I should have known. But, Your Majesty, you aren't actually expecting me to win, are you?" Gustav asked. "I'm no hero of legend." "No, just put on a good show, a reminder that our kingdom is nothing to mock, that is all we ask of you," Kalka said to him with an indulgent air. "Do well, and make us look good." "I can do that, at least," Gustav said with confidence, and relaxed as the pressure eased off of him a little. The Queen of Frost sat on her throne and listened to the kneeling elf woman. She was a stunning jewel, one of those from the southern Holy Kingdom's darkest cities, and acted sometimes as a liaison every now and then between the peoples close to the border and the Kingdom of Nazarick's trade envoys, and her concern on this occasion was a particular project of Naya's. "So you see, Your Majesty, the elves of your country are deeply concerned that your road will cut through their forest a great deal and disrupt their natural growth. The large road you envision will cut wildlife off from one another, stir up monsters, and make it difficult for my people to perform the tasks you yourself set us to. I realize that the merchants of Riestais and Demalbion would both profit from this road. But I beg you to reconsider its course." "Ilyana," Naya said with a weary sigh, "I understand and appreciate your concern, truly." She held out her talon-tipped hand. "Go on, rise. After your people endured so much hardship, it must feel like you're being taken from again. I hadn't realized this road would disrupt so much." She looked over to her left as Ilyana stood up. "Nazreen, how much time will be added to the journey if we shift the road around the outskirts of the forest?" The white monster's forearms whipped out pads and quills and immediately began to calculate numbers. The sound of scratching tips on papers was the only thing in the expansive hall of the royal palace of Demalbian's capital of Tavajar, until the secretary and advisor of the Queen of Frost finished her calculations. Your Majesty, on foot it would add roughly 1 week, but on a carriage or horseback it would add roughly 3 days. Nisrine's calm approach was completely neutral, and her blank white face revealed nothing to the elf or the Queen. I see. Well, we were looking to relocate people to the area. If we build one small town on the outskirts of a road, we can afford a diversion of that sort and add a new opportunity for profit. Plus the elves need a new avenue for trade anyway. Naya answered more to herself than anything, and only then recalled that Ileana was present. That will be our compromise. The road will circle the forest the long way, but we have excess humans waiting for land, and the diversion will belong to them. I realize your people have an aversion to humans, but as a further compromise, not one of them will be from the south where your people suffered so much. Naya offered, and Ileana deeply bowed her head, her golden hair tumbling wild and free before her. Your Majesty, I am sure all those I represent will be truly grateful for your understanding. There is only one more small thing. The matter of the monsters. If you establish such a town, surely some will be displaced and invade our space. Ileana trailed off when she saw the fang-filled smile of the Dragonid Queen. That I already considered. I think I'm allowed to be a little bit selfish at least, and I will have those minor monsters relocated to an area closer to Tavajar that I want to turn into my own private game reserve. When I was a human, I used to love to hunt, and it would be good to have that time again. The Queen of Frost kept the grin on her face. It was hard not to. The prospect of an escape from her endless duties was far too wonderful to ignore. Thank you again, Your Majesty. Ileana answered, and when the Queen waved her hand to brush it aside, Ileana departed. An hour later, Ileana was kneeling beside her lover in Albedo's office. It went as expected, my lady. The elves let me speak for them. They remembered me well as it turned out, and the Queen of Frost met their needs. She may be a tyrant, but she seems to balance the needs of each race as fairly as she can. If there were any doubt remaining that she would treat fairly with His Majesty's representative, there is none now. One less thing to worry about, then. And Skarna, were you able to work out anything about the Phantom Napper? Albedo asked, and at that the former human female flushed a little red. I've found all his favorite places, just like you told me to, my lady. But there's no objects, no magic items, just the occasional arrow and a few bones from hunted meals. If I may speak freely, my lady, I have a theory, Skarna said and chewed on her lower lip for a moment. Go on, Albedo commanded. My lady, I lived my whole life as nothing but a selfish, lazy human. I lived only for pleasure, happiness, and occasionally, lots of occasionally, sex, and drinking, and sometimes both. She grinned a little sheepishly. I think that's this man too. I truly don't believe he is doing more than what he seems to be doing. He naps, he eats, he hunts, he sometimes drinks. He's been avoiding any contact with dangerous demi-humans, and any demi-humans for a very long time. If he hated them, you'd think he'd at least pick fights. My personal belief is that this man from the East is just powerful enough to be confident, but all he really wants is to have a good time. He can't do it at home, so he goes somewhere else. There. I see, Albedo said succinctly. We'll put this to the test then, see that the Queen of Frost crosses paths with him during a hunting trip of hers, and what happens then. If he's hostile, we can eliminate him, and if he's not, he may be useful. As you will, my lady. The pair said with uniform devotion. Volume 7 C6. For the Queen of the Roble Holy Kingdom, time was ephemeral, and it was as easy to see the road ahead as it was to see through a single gossamer weave. The road rolled on and the scenery changed. The road, once so damaged by the demi-humans during their rampage, was now fully repaired, thanks in no small part to harvesting materials from the wall. It was fortunate that the Queen of Frost was willing to share such as it were. Numerous homes and expansive repairs were made from the resulting dismantling of the structure. As a result, the road was intact and her carriage ride was smooth. The trees thickened as they passed through the wildlands once kept as the territory of the huntress turned queen. With the sun high in the sky, it should have been bright as day on the road, but thanks to the thick green foliage and overhanging branches, the shadows cast in places made the carriage pass through a night-like darkness, sometimes for dozens of yards at a time. "Do you think monsters are a concern here?" Queen Kalka asked as she peered into the shadows of the deep wood. A cold trace of dread ran up the spine of the city woman. The mysterious chaos of the thick woodlands acted as a natural camouflage to the life she was sure watched just out of view. "I doubt it, my queen," Kellett answered, but she set a slender hand protectively and reassuringly on the knee of the ruler of the country. "During the Demalbian invasion, the armies of our enemies used the forests extensively to hide their movement. As a result, many of the monsters were wiped out. It will be years, maybe decades before they are a threat to us again, and maybe never if we start development of settlements early next year like we plan." Kalka relaxed a little and put her hand over the one which rested on her knee. She took a little breath and, perhaps heartened by her lover's words, she put her head out the window to feel the wind racing over her skin and help her see the far horizon. The world opened up like a marvelous canvas. The endless blue of the sky and the endless world beyond seemed to meet at some distant place toward which they were racing. With the wall missing, there was nothing to bar sight of the foreign kingdom except a few scattered ruins. With the wall gone, the fortress which guarded its widest point was gone too, and with the fortress gone, the buildings around it were either gone or fallen over. Either destroyed during the fighting, or destroyed for new materials, or simply tumbled due to weather and neglect, or picked over by scavengers from either side of the border. Kalka drummed her fingers on her other knee, and Kellett could only laugh while Gustav drifted off and began to snore. "Are you that eager, my?" She looked at the sleeping Gustav, his mouth hanging open as his head lolled back against the corner of the carriage. "Sure that he was asleep," she said, "my love?" Kalka picked up her son out of the little carriage-adapted crib and rocked him in her arms. "It's time for my son to meet his father. Of course I'm excited. I may still be a little shaky on my feet, but with things as they are, it can't be helped. And that's the part that makes me nervous. I've known since the start that he was deeply in love with someone else. I have no doubt she'll be there." "No doubt. But still." Kellett squeezed her hand over the knee of her queen. "You bore him a son. It nearly killed you. No man can forget that. Not if he's worthy of an heir. The child of the less loved wife. I've heard so many stories of that going wrong. What if his other woman wants my son set aside? What if she demands he not pick my child up? What if he favors her child so much it hurts the one we share? What if I made a huge mistake?" Kalka asked and caressed the boy's face. He yawned a little mouth wide and little body wiggling in his slumber. Somehow we'll make things work. Don't think like that. We'll do everything we can, you, me, Gustav, the whole kingdom if we have to." Kellett promised with breathless urgency, and kissed Kalka on the cheek with the gentleness of a butterfly landing on a flower petal. The growing war between tension, nervous excitement, and anxiety began to end as her companion put forward the promise of support, and Kalka began to relax again, savoring the quiet moments as the carriage continued to roll onward. Weeks after negotiations were finalized and the Queen of Frost received word that the Holy Queen was on her way, the hour was finally upon them. Naya stood at the edge of the grove. Her own carriage was more or less needless, given her ability to fly, but there was more at stake and both queens knew it. For that reason, the Queen of Frost was ready to make a show of peaceful intent by traveling with her former foe across national borders to observe the struggle of champions. Naya, for her part, traveled with only a handful of guards, 2 elves, 2 orcs, and a blader to drive the carriage. As she looked at them there, riding atop horses purchased from the Holy Kingdom, it was difficult not to feel a sense of pride. They were bedecked in fine armor of blended steel and orichalcum with a trace of adamantite, a mere strip or two over vulnerable places to stop a potentially lethal slash, but like everything in Demalbian, efficiency was key. However, aside from the slow growth of her industrial-scale mining operations to harvest the vast untapped resources of the region, the truest pride she felt was in their readiness. They were still, moving only their eyes, their ears, pricked up and keenly listening for threats even when it seemed safe. For the elves this was expected, while the orcs with their traditional arrogance gave way to serene confidence tempered by caution. Ready for danger when it seemed safe, and gone was the lazy contempt of those who wrongly believed themselves invincible. Naya's keen ears caught the sound of rolling wheels and she turned her head to face the source of the noise. True to her expectation, The racing carriage and its escort of horsemen approached like thunder brought to ground. The beasts were magnificent, each one half again as tall as a full-grown man, with muscular flanks and broad, powerful bodies. The paladins themselves were no less impressive, clad in rune-crafted armor burnished to a shine. Nia felt her covetous instincts rise as she saw it loom larger with every step of the hooves of the horses. As much as I love my bow. Who wouldn't want more of that stuff? The carriage began to slow as it drew closer, and the horses began to slow to a trot to match, but nonetheless they made excellent time, and within a few minutes of seeing them, the carriage slowed to a halt. Nia watched as Gustav exited, though he refused to meet her eyes. That was unsurprising. Instead he kept his eyes focused on the carriage itself. He opened the door and pronounced with his back stiffened eyes up to watch the Queen's descent, Queen Kalka Besseres, ruler of the Roble Holy Kingdom. And I, Her Royal Scaliness, Queen of Frost, Nia Baraha, greet my royal sister. Nia laughed at her own self-effacing humor, and it was at least enough to bring a smile to the slowly moving Queen. To Nia's eyes, the Queen was worse for the wear. Her steps were slow and she was being assisted by Kellett as well as Gustav. Her face was radiant and bright, but her hair? Gone was the honey blonde, and instead was a bountiful white golden shade, still youthful in its luster and life. It was nonetheless no longer the color Nia recalled. But the warmth the Holy Queen exuded was no less. In one arm the Queen held her child, a sleeping boy, and on her face, the contented smile of a mother pleased with what she bore. You know, the Holy Queen remarked as she came closer to the Queen of Frost, some would say it's undignified to be humorous instead of formal when royalty meets. Nia inclined her head in acceptance of the benign critique, and I would say they should relax a fair bit in a small gathering. Nia gave the Queen a toothy smile, her tail waved lazily behind her, and she extended her hand to the human Queen. Kalka took it, and Nia, with gentle care, only lightly closed her hand around the porcelain skin. It's good to see you, Nia said sincerely. If you want the truth, I was half expecting you to skip this meeting, given our history. Kalka waited until the Queen of Frost released her hand. Her scales are so smooth. The Queen of the Roble Holy Kingdom thought abstractly before answering. It's because of that I can't. I loved. No. I love Remedios. But I am the Queen, Kalka said with iron resolve. The things she did were directly responsible for nearly toppling my realm. The hand you played in her. Whatever fate she now has? If I let her actions go, I might as well throw all our books of law into a bonfire. As to the dead between us, we both suffered loss. It's our job to make sure it doesn't happen again. Nia inclined her head to her counterpart. You're the Queen my former home deserves, at least now, she said and drew her lips up in a smile that barely concealed her teeth. Your son by the All-Father. May I see? I won't ask to hold him, I'm just curious. Kalka looked between the dragonid and her boy, a mother's instincts warred on her face before she relaxed with a breath. If you want to hold him. Nia immediately denied it, shaking her head vigorously enough to bounce her loose hair around behind her head. She replied, I was ugly enough that I made children cry when I was still a human child myself. If he were to see me as I am, I think he'd cry all the way to our winter. I'd just like to see, that's all. Kalka felt a sympathetic wince in her soul, that anyone should think of themselves that way. But she offered no hollow words of comfort, she instead merely honored the wishes of the Queen of Demalbian and moved aside the little blue cloth that obscured her son's face and part of the little mop of dark hair on his head. He looks perfect. Nia praised the Queen and gave her a winsome look. I'm sure he'll be a fine man when he's grown up. I will do what I can to make him so. The Queen responded, and then with that, Nia gestured to her own carriage. Should we get going? It's a long way to our winter. The Queen of Frost folded in her wings, retracting them against her back, and with that, they were ready to leave on the long journey to the northeast.